Testing, testing. Sound like it's on? Okay, good. Thank you, Adam and worship team. That was a blessing. Well, we're ready for John 6 today. I'm going to be covering verses 1 through 21. There's a lot more to that chapter. And if you'd like to know more or hear commentary, Mark gave a great talk last summer on metaphors. And the rest of that chapter has a lot of metaphors, so I'd encourage you to look at that. He commented on the rest of the chapter this past summer. I'm not sure what month that was, but anyway, it's on the web, right? All the past sessions. Is that right, Adam?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Adam. Last session we talked about two miracles of Jesus. There were two healings that I talked about. One at a distance for a Gentile official, and one on a crippled person by the pool of Bethesda. They were categorized by one author and commentator as the second and third signs that Jesus is the Messiah. Today there's two more miracles we're going to look at in John 6, and they're in the title here, the feeding of the 5,000 and walking on water. These, by the same commentator, are referred to as the fourth and fifth miracles, which identify Jesus as Messiah. To introduce this section, I'm going to ask a question. My question is, have you ever had an experience which brought you an incredible amount of joy and elation and was a total surprise? Anybody had an experience like that? Okay. We're going to talk about experiences like that today in these miracles. As an example, in my life, the birth of my first child, Brittany, was one of those for me. Bridget was one of those, was a pioneer of a new birth method back in the 70s called the Lamaze method, or natural childbirth. I was expected to attend several sessions, training sessions with her to be a coach in this method. Sound familiar to anybody in here? Okay. We went through the sessions faithfully, and I performed the job without much expectation or emotion. I did it because I was supposed to be there. I have to admit, I was kind of a creep of a husband, but anyway. The day of the birth, the doctor delivering the baby was actually a work colleague of Bridget, good friend, and so everything was really amiable, very friendly, loving and supportive. When the baby, Brett, was actually born, I was totally elated. I had no idea that I'd feel the way I felt. I mean, I was absolutely high on joy. It was one of the most joyful, satisfying moments of my entire life. And I never anticipated it. So let's go to the scripture. Feeding 5,000. See if we can bring that up here. There we go. I think I'll put some glasses on. After these things, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee or Tiberias. A large crowd was following him because they were watching the signs which he was performing on those who were sick. But Jesus went up to the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was near, so Jesus, after raising his eyes and seeing that a large crowd was coming to him, said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" But he was saying this only to test him, for he himself knew what he intended to do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not enough for them, for each to receive just a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are these for so many people?" Jesus said, have the people recline to eat. Now there was plenty of grass in the place, so the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. And Jesus took the loaves, and after giving thanks, he distributed them to those who were reclining. Likewise also to the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they'd eaten their fill, he said to the disciples, gather up the leftover pieces so that nothing will be lost. So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with pieces from the barley loaves, which were left over by those who had eaten. Therefore, when the people saw the sign which he performed, they said, this is truly the prophet who is to come unto the world. So Jesus, aware that they intended to come take him by force and make him king, withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. So, according to this account, Jesus had grown a lot more popular with the people because of the miracles. And so they were literally flocking to him. In other accounts of the found in the Synoptics, they have, all four Gospels share this account, say that they were in a desolate place, and thousands have followed him from the cities nearby. So the disciples, what's their first thought? We can't help these people, right? We didn't bring food with us. What are we going to do? Send them away, Jesus. Send them back to the city so they can find some food. Well, he says, no, you're going to feed them. Specifically, he tells Philip, you're going to feed them. Philip has doubts. Where are we going to buy bread? Buy enough bread to feed them. We know he has doubts because of his response about money. Does anyone think he might not know the story of God feeding the Israelites in the wilderness? He knew that story, didn't he? Does he think Jesus is God? Probably not, right? Probably not. He's having doubts. Jesus has not convinced Philip, maybe not fully the other disciples as well. So, Jesus says, we're going to feed the people. And Andrew notes the 2 small fish and 5 barley loaves. So Jesus says, get the crowd ready, set them down, and you're going to distribute the food to them. He breaks up the bread and the fish and disciples to distribute them. Now, I want you to think about this. You got 5,000 men, and whoever the men are accompanied by, probably some women and children, right? So the crowd is vast. How long would it take you to prepare a meal for thousands of people? Well, probably a week, right? Many days. Well, Jesus, obviously the food preparation is a little easier. It's just breaking it up. But literally, food is being created out of thin air, right? But that's going to take some time, unless Jesus' hands are moving like some Superman. I don't know. I can't visualize it. But I know this. It must have taken a fairly long time. Maybe all day. Maybe all day to distribute that food. There's only 12 disciples and many thousands of people. So this was an all-day event, basically. And everybody ate as much as they wanted. Not only that, there were 12 baskets left over. What was the message to Philip and the other disciples? Any ideas? Anybody want to take a guess?
I'm God.
Yes, I'm God. You know, I can take care of this situation. Not only that, I'm going to take care of people's needs abundantly. Abundantly. So, how do you think the disciples were feeling? Was this blessing a surprise? And was it a burden? Or was it a blessing? Was it a blessing to them? They must have thought, wow, this is so cool, you know, to be a part of this. It was a tremendous blessing to everyone. It was such a blessing that all the people were so enthusiastic, they wanted to, make Jesus their king. They were taught, because of course they were expecting a political leader, weren't they? They were expecting a political leader. And so Jesus sensed this and said, no, I'm out of here. And he was probably exhausted anyway, right? I mean, think about breaking that much bread to feed thousands and thousands of people. I bet he was worn out physically. And he did get worn out a lot, didn't he? Because he was a physical person. He got worn out. So he left to recover from his exhaustion. And the synoptics say he went up to pray on a mountain. So that's the feeding of the 5,000. Let's look at the next section of Scripture, which is shorter. It's John 6, 16 through 21. Now when evening came, the disciples went down to the sea, and after getting into the boat, they started to cross the sea to Capernaum. It had already become dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. In addition, the sea began getting rough because of a strong wind was blowing. Then when they'd rowed about 25 or 30 stadia, they saw Jesus walking on the water and coming near the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." So they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. So that's a really short version. Other synoptics describe this event in more detail. This is described in, I think, all the other synoptics as well. If you want to reference Matthew 14, 22 through 31, describes it. So I'll be using some of those details as well from those scriptures. So after feeding the 5,000, Jesus actually sent the disciples across the Sea of Galilee and went up the mountain to pray. When he was finished, it was about 3 a.m. And he came down and started walking out in the sea towards the disciples. A storm was raging at that point, and the disciples had been fighting it for hours. Now I want you to consider the desperation. First of all, you work a full day, running back and forth, carrying food to people, feeding people. You might have had a good night's sleep last night, but here you are at 3 o'clock in the morning. You haven't had sleep for quite some time. And you're physically exhausted, and you're about to die in a storm, you think. That's what it feels like. They were desperate. And here comes somebody walking across the water. You can't recognize him. It's dark. Maybe it's a ghost. That wouldn't be too unusual to consider at that time, They were exhausted and frightened. And so they finally did recognize it was Jesus, and he said, "Don't be afraid. I've got everything under control." Now Peter wanted to test him. He was walking on water. And he said, "Lord, if it's you, I'm not sure. I think you might still be a ghost. Call me out here. Call me out here." And so Jesus did. He said, "Come on." And so we know the story. He started walking toward Jesus, and what happened? He stopped looking at Jesus and started looking at the water. Down he went, right? And Jesus pulled him up. His courage failed in the face of the storm when he took his eyes off Jesus. And there's a lesson in faith just in that little segment. We're to be walking by faith, but our eyes have to be kept on the one that we're faithful to. If our eyes start drifting away from that one, then our faith starts failing, doesn't it? When Jesus got into the boat, the storm immediately subsided. And the disciples were in total awe. Here's a man that can not only manufacture food out of thin air, he can tell storms to subside. He has control over the storms. Did they expect that miracle? I don't think so. I bet they were really glad, though, right? They were really glad. These miracles, let's have a little discussion here. These miracles are notable because they extend the power of the Messiah into the natural realm. He created food out of thin air, just as God created manna for Israel in the wilderness. So what does that say for God's ability to provide for us in our hour of need? What does that say? Is God willing? God is willing. Is He able? God is able. He's willing and He's able. God is fully able to control weather events. And I'm not going to explore this because this is another can of worms about why some are spared and others are taken during catastrophic events, like tornadoes and hurricanes. I don't have any answers for you there. But I think we must acknowledge that God has complete control over weather events, and it's entirely appropriate to pray and ask for safety, ask for deliverance. Entirely appropriate. As a disciple, I would have been absolutely stunned and awed to see this kind of power displayed by my Messiah. All that food made and then a basket left for me as one of the 12. And thinking I'm going to die on this sea, and here He comes walking over on water at night. I want to suggest something here. That God loves to bless His followers with unexpected deliverances or blessings. That's too much use of blessing, but anyway. That God loves to create situations or have situations where we get blessed unexpectedly. Unexpectedly. Think back in your life. Think back in your life. Has God shown you any unexpected blessings that felt miraculous? I shared one earlier. That was a little bit before I became a believer, actually. But I've got two more to share in my life, and I want you to be thinking about your lives because I'd like some testimonies here. I'd like to open it to testimonies because I don't know. I think these kind of testimonies bless our brothers and sisters, encourage us. So here's a couple of mine. In my 20s, early 20s, I'd fallen away from the church and God in graduate school, but through Bible study and witnesses from friends and family, I got back to attending church and thinking about being baptized. This was in my latter 20s, those things were happening. And Bridget and I moved to Murray, and I was talking to a campus minister by the name of Dean Ross about this, about my desire to be baptized. And unfortunately, Bridget was not in the same place as me at that time. She'd been resistant to attending church, but this particular Sunday, she was receptive to coming to and joining me at Murray Christian Fellowship Church. Dean preached the gospel, gave an invitation at the end, and to my surprise, Bridget went forward and gave her life to Christ. Some of this is, you've heard, some of you old hands have heard this a number of times. Some of you were there, okay, at that baptism. We were both baptized that day in the fall of 1977. One of the greatest unexpected blessings of my life. God set it up. He totally set it up. And one of the most unexpected blessings for our marriage as well. Another one more, if you don't mind. Following the death of my father in 2003, I was feeling a bit down and missing him badly. We were close my whole life. He always had an encouraging word for me. He was a devoted follower of Jesus, and one of my gifts to him, Christmas gift, perhaps a year or so before his death, was a new Bible. And I inherited that Bible after he passed. And one day, during this difficult period of mourning for him, I was looking over the Bible, looking over a few scriptures, and went to Proverbs. And to my surprise, in numerous spots in Proverbs, he had highlighted certain verses in there, and he designated them for his sons, these specific verses. And my name was prominent there, and sometimes he'd have all, this is for all his sons, and I was floored and so blessed that my father could speak to me past the grave. And of course, it was God, wasn't it? It was God setting all this up to bless one of his beloved children. He is a wonderful father, isn't he? Who has an example? Anybody else? Sherry, come on.
This is just one example of God's provision in our life. When we left, we're preparing to leave Virginia. Well, I'll even back up. When we left California in December of 2015, Ellie had essentially quit his job, taken early retirement in February. But he told him he wasn't going to leave until November, I believe. And we left practically December 1st. He didn't have a job. He didn't get a job until November, beginning of November. And that was the job that he'd had in Virginia. When we decided to move here, we actually bought the house in 2018. And Ellie had made an agreement with the company he was working with that he would work remotely, but they required him to go back to the company every quarter, once a quarter, on his dime. There was really no rhyme or reason that he needed to go back there, but he had to go back on his dime. So when we were getting ready to leave Virginia, out of the blue, Ellie gets this phone call from Oracle Company. And they said, "Hey, we saw your resume online. Would you be interested in a 100% remote position?" Sure. And so he hadn't applied for the job. He didn't even know the job existed. They contacted him out of the blue. And so rather than having this remote job where he had to go back every quarter on his dime, God provided him with a 100% remote job here with better pay.
Good example. Anybody else want to share? Okay. Yeah, Ellie, come on.
Yeah, that was a surprise to me. That was sure a surprise. God's blessing. Totally different. This may sound sort of weird, but honestly, it's the truth. I'm not making it up. Years ago, Sherry and I lived in Rochester, New York. And I grew up in New York City. I'm used to the subways. I'm used to trains and that kind of stuff. But One day I was on a trip by myself, and it was one of those trains, I think it was in Long Island, it was one of those trains that did not go under the ground yet. Okay, it was there at a station. And it just so happened to be a Sunday. There was no one around on the platform. There was just myself. It was empty. Not surprised on a Sunday. And you would think I would know better. But, huh? Not everyone who knows me. Yeah, but I was just curious. I was sort of bored. I looked this way, there on the tracks, just waiting for the train to come, okay? And I'm just looking. There was no train, obviously, okay? And I'm like this, okay? The train is going this way, but I just happen to be like this. Suddenly, totally unexpectedly, I hear a voice, just like this. Hey! And I turn my head, train goes. If I had not turned my head, sort of like President Trump, you know, if he turned his head, a bullet. If I had not turned my head in that instant, that train, talk about the headless horseman. I mean, that train would have hit me right smack dab in the face. It was that fast. Someone said, hey! I turned my head. As I turned my head, I saw the person. Where the person came from, I have no clue. The person had a hat on. White guy, sort of tall. And he just said, hey! And I turned my head, and then boom, the train went like that. I was in shock. The train was going. I mean, the train is long, okay? But I'm like this. And initially, when I turned my head, when I heard the voice, I saw this person, this man, with a hat on, tall guy. And I was shocked because the train went, and I turned my head again, and the man was gone. He was just gone. The platform was completely empty. I was the only one on that platform. And the train was, because the train is long, okay, so it kept going. It eventually stopped. That was my train. But I was in absolute shock. Absolute shock. And I told Sherry when I came home, I said, you can't believe this. And it was like, where is that person? I looked. I mean, honestly, folks, I looked. And the platform, like I said a moment ago, was totally empty. I mean, where in the world could the person have disappeared? Did he jump? 6 feet off the ground. Where did he go? Okay? It happened so fast. And true story. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, Tom.
So Lois went for a long time without ever getting pregnant. And so we prayed and prayed for a son. And when he arrived, we named him Sam, which means a gift from God.
Anyone else? Come on, Bart.
These happen right close around this building. Two things. One time I had all the kids in the car, and I was at this road right here, and I remember looking that way and pulling out, just starting to gun my car, and it's not like I saw anything, but I just slammed on the brakes, and like right here, there was a LG and one of those great big trucks with the hoppers, which I just almost pulled right out in front of. And I have no idea why I just slammed on my brakes, because I did not see that vehicle at all. that happened right there. And then another time, y'all probably remember this, we had all the kids, they were really little, and I was yapping up here in the front, with people, and Phil taking the kids onto the car. And little Elizabeth, she was about 3 at that point, and all of a sudden I saw all these people running towards the end of the parking lot. And it turned out that Phil had buckled the kids in, but Liz had somehow gotten out of her safety belt and had walked around to the back of his car, and he actually backed over her. And her little knees, she was just small enough that her little knees had little oil spots on the little knee part, and there was gravel on the thing, you know what I mean? And it didn't even hurt her. And that's the reason that for many years we all parked instead of backing out, we parked the other way. But I just remember almost like having a heart attack, basically, when I saw those people running, because, it just smacked her right down, but she was small enough that she just went right under the car. So that's kind of a cool thing.
Thanks for reminding me when we backed into our parking places for years after that. Anybody else have one? Yeah, Jamie?
I feel like God has rescued me, but I've been through a lot of difficult situations in my life, and I don't know if it's like that for you. The majority of times where I feel God just sort of touching me or working a miracle has been through something hard. One of those times it was our 3rd pregnancy, and I went into the office late. I was 12 weeks along before I saw Tom, and I was really excited. I was like, ooh, I can still wear my non-pregnant jeans. And we do an ultrasound, and the baby's heartbeat isn't beating. And so I find out the baby is dead, and I'm devastated. And I go home, and my mom is there, and I'm crying. And my mom isn't an emotional person. She doesn't know what to do when hard situations like this come. So I was just weeping, and I get a phone call, and it's Sarah Cunningham, if any of you know her. And she's like, I felt God tell me to call you right now. So she prayed with me, and I just felt such peace about this. And so as the pregnancy went on, I had some choices I had to make, and I just didn't feel like I could have a D&C. I felt like if there's still a baby in me, there's hope that maybe God could work a miracle. But he didn't choose to work that miracle. So I carried this child for about 4 months, and then I had the miscarriage. And it was hard. I didn't know what to expect, so there was that fear. But I remember the night when it happened, we actually hosted a youth group event, and we were having a movie night. And I think it was an all-girl night. And so the girls were spending the night, and then I started to miscarriage. Everyone was asleep, so I was kind of alone and by myself. But I remember Adam was there, and he was in and out. But at the end of it all, I was just sort of sitting on the bed and grieving and crying. And then I just felt God's presence in a very real physical way. I mean, it was almost like Adam was there hugging me, but no one was in the room with me. And I believe in my heart it was the Holy Spirit, and he just surrounded me with this hug. It was so surreal because I literally felt a presence next to me holding me. And I just felt so much peace about that. And I was really encouraged. And then, a month later we got pregnant with Cademan. And there's a whole nother blessing connected with that. But the second instance that I just felt God reach in and touch us and just bring peace in the middle of a storm, it was really recently. And we were in the middle of our home renovations, and we were swamped. I mean, we were swamped with our new business. Adam was very stressed out. He has so many irons in the fire. It's ridiculous. And then Our house renovations were not small renovations like let's change the carpet. They were very major renovations, like we need to redo this entire floor structure, we need to change walls, we need to redo the whole electric. And so in the middle of that, we were really struggling, and Adam was really struggling, and then God just put a lady in his path that is a really good friend and connection, and she had some connections with this one couple. And this one couple, unbeknownst to us, they work in town, but their heart is for missionary construction work specifically. And so they were on sort of like, I don't know what you call it, a furlough, but they didn't have any construction work with the company they worked for 2 months straight. And so they approached us and they said, we want to bless you and do this work on your house for these 2 months that we're off, and we want to do it for free. And so we just felt God just reaching down and taking this huge burden off of our shoulders in that way and providing, because we didn't expect that, and what a blessing that was to us.
I just kind of feel this is one of these, like, I need to be obedient and share this. So when Lily was born and everything seemed fine, and day 6, 7 rolls around, both of her grandmothers say, she looks like she's breathing really hard, or working really hard to breathe. And she's 8 days old, and something's not right. And money was tight, so it was sort of like, let's go to the doctor. Let's not go to the emergency room. So I can tell you, if part of a person's body changes color, just go to the emergency room. If one arm turns gray and not the whole body is, well, if they turn gray, go to the emergency room anyway. But especially if one part of them is turning gray, just go. And this wasn't the part of the story that I was going to share, but Leah, who lived closer to the clinic that we were taking Lily to, because of course we also had Gabe, and Leah did not answer her phone that day, so I wasn't taking Gabe to Leah. So the next closest people were Chris and Bridget. So Gabe went to sit with Chris and Bridget while Lily was going to the doctor. And when the doctor misdiagnosed her but sent her to the hospital, I was telling Bridget, hey, here's the development. Can Gabe stay with you guys a little bit longer? Blah, blah, blah. And this is not the part of the story that I thought I was going to be sharing. And like I said, there was a misdiagnosis. She got sent to the wrong part of the hospital. A lot of the nurses there didn't know what to do with her. I wasn't there. Probably, thank God, that's probably another part of the part of the provision. Caleb was there. I was making sure Gabe was where he needed to be. I was trying to return phone calls. I was trying to put a hold on our meal train and everything. And and at one point, I looked at my phone, which had been on silent, and I had some obscene number of missed calls from Caleb. And so where she had been diagnosed as having like pneumonia or something, it was actually her heart failing. She was having congestive heart failure. But because Gabe was with Bridget and the girls, at one point when they knew that we were taking Lily to the hospital, didn't know anything other than that, they just knew that she was going to the hospital, and Bridget and the girls gathered around to pray. And Chris walked in. This is how Bridget tells the story. Chris walked in, asked what was happening, and when Bridget told him, he got this feeling like he just needed to be where Lily was. And so Bridget looks up after the prayer, and Chris is gone. And so Chris got there and was probably the difference between life and death that day. So the part of the story that I was going to share, although I think that's probably the bigger part of the story. Because then, of course, they sent a team up from Vanderbilt, stabilized her, put her on a big old bus, took her down to Vanderbilt, where we were for about 3 weeks. She'd been in such bad shape when she got there, and they made the diagnosis, and it's like she needs a surgery. It took 2 days to kind of get her body to calm down enough to where they could do the surgery responsibly. And at one point, my dad asked, he's like, "You guys going to be okay after this?" Meaning financially. And at that point, we pretty well learned our lesson. It's just like, you know what, she's alive. Like, we will deal with that later. And she was there we got home when she was 28 or 29 days old. And I start seeing 1 or 2 of the bills come in for 1 or 2 parts of this. So there's a helicopter involved, there's the baby bus involved, wasn't even seeing the bills for Vanderbilt yet, tens of thousands of dollars. And I one day got this notice, this balance that said $0 balance. I was like, what is going on? Because I did not have insurance for maternity at that point. I had a secondary insurance that just covered stuff for me, not for the baby. And so I'm thinking, I want to make sure this is correct. So I called my insurance. They said, according to Kentucky law, we have to cover everything for that baby until they are 30 days old. So huge provision for us there. Not as huge as everything that happened the day that she didn't die. But that was the part that I felt impressed that I needed to come up here and share. So oops. I might have accidentally turned that off.
One more, Barb.
I just stand here. Yeah, I'm kind of like Janelle. I kept getting the Pope to share this. Mine's similar to Ellie's and to one of Barb's. We were in New Jersey, and it was a dark and stormy night. Literally. I was heading home from a women's meeting, and I had to come up to this intersection to make a left. So I got in the left turn lane, and all of a sudden, I heard, "Stop back here." Again, it was enough that I looked up in the rearview mirror to see who was back there. And so I kept on going, and again, "Stop back here." So I stopped, thinking, anybody else comes up, they're going to think I'm some sort of idiot, because here's 4 or 5 car links in front of me in the turn lane. So I sat there, and to the left, there was a police car that had his lights on, coming around and made a turn towards me and went right into the left lane and right back out as he went past me. I was a little shook up by the time I got home.
Okay, just to make the point then. God's with us all the time, isn't he? He knows every detail of our lives, and he's perfectly able and willing to perform a miracle so that we will acknowledge, I guess for lots of reasons, because he loves us. You know, we're his children. So I found this to be very encouraging. And I hope if you've never experienced something like this, I suspect that you will. I suspect that you will, because he loves to do this for his kids. Bridget? Okay. One last one.
Okay, I have a lot of things that I sat there thinking, I don't know if I have something. And then it started, as you guys were sharing, I was like, oh yeah, that and that and that. But what I wanted to share is, those of you who know our situation with Sam, with our son Sam, and that's why we named him as well. But Sam is adopted by us from Nepal, and that was a miracle in and of itself, because, long story short, Chris and I didn't want to have kids when we first got married, and then we had 2, and then there was a problem, and we decided not to have any more, and then there was a 3rd one that happened, and then God, about 6 years later, sent us to go get Sam. The whole thing about Sam is a miracle. And so if you want to know that story and you don't know it, I'll tell you gladly. Another miracle tied to that was that I had read every book on adopting an older child, and they were nightmares. First of all, I thought I was going to probably raise a serial killer because he was not going to bond to us and he was going to be scared of us. And I'd read, where people are attacked by their children, and that does happen. And it's not the parents' fault; it's just the children are broken. But anyway, so when we got to the orphanage, one of the miracles was that Chris, we had just prayed and prayed that he wouldn't be scared of us, that he would bond to us. And when we got there was a little boy standing behind the table staring at us. And his little nanny was talking to him. And then she stood up and stepped aside, and Chris got down on his one knee, held his arms open. And Sam ran into Chris's arms like he had known him all his life. And that was a miracle as well. It's just amazing. But one of the things that's happening now, and I've mentioned this in our life right now, is our children are in a stage of seeking their own belief system. And so Sam, the one that's just got all kinds of miracle around him from God, is seeking. So that's good, and it's annoying. Because it's annoying. Those of you who are in that phase or have been in that phase, you understand that. And I'm squeezing this microphone so hard it's going to snap in a second. Anyway, but I was expressing some stress to some friends of mine recently. And one of them shared, what in the world? Sorry, I don't know what happened. One of them shared something with me that I want to share because some of us we know God does miracles, and we've seen them happen, and yet we might be in a phase where we're waiting for something. And what she shared was this: relationship is anything but simple, and this in-between place where you don't know where or how to land or what to do, this, Bridget, is a holy place. It's a holy tension. Sarah Bessey refers to it as the penny in the air, a slow motion flip of a coin waiting to see how it lands, heads or tails. Lots of people will urge that penny to hurry up and choose a side. But God is patient, and that tension of being caught in the air may last the rest of your life, my life, anyone's life who's living this out and wondering what, why, and how. And then she said she's praying for God to supply me with wisdom. But I'm also praying for you to be supplied with the macrothymia, patience of Ephesians 4:2, which is translated long-suffering. His deep breath that is in no hurry for the penny to land. So the waiting for a miracle. And these helped me remember